Welcome to the news for the week of the 26th April 2020. Shade ransomware, Microsoft Teams vulnerabilities, SCADA attacks, and biological computing. All this and Jason Wood on today's Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the countless ways our critical systems can be put in jeopardy. Ransomware attacks, misconfiguration, user error, and malicious threat actors, to name a few. As IT infrastructures continue to grow and diversify, how do you ensure stable security? Core Security, a HelpSystems company, provides an analytics-driven, layered approach to security with a portfolio that enables both proactive and reactive responses. With Core Security, you can reduce risk by limiting access, detect upcoming and active threats, test for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitor data for actionable insights. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/core security.
Here comes the news. Shade ransomware, which is also called Trolldish, and Encoder 858 has been around a long time. So this is old stuff. It's from like 2014. And in 2016, if you aren't familiar with Shade, it was remodded. So this was one of the first ones of those kind of piece of ransomware that got a new framework. And it was released with new Trojan capabilities. And it actually last year was listed as one of the top ransomware threats. The interesting thing about this story, and not that ransomware is anything new, the author just recently announced that Shade was no longer going to be distributed as of the end of 2019. And then this week, they released the 750,000 or so decryption keys for this. And so I guess it was the first end of life announcement for malware. So as malware becomes more of a malware as a service kind of stuff, it was like, well, okay, so it's a malware business model. They've reached end of life and are recommending you upgrade to Shade ransomware version 3.7 or something like that. Microsoft released a patch for a vulnerability which allowed the hijacking of Microsoft Teams accounts. Basically, what this involved was they sent a GIF, and I say GIF. I'm sorry, I know the whole argument, and we won't go there. But especially crafted link or a GIF could be sent to a targeted user in Microsoft Teams. And basically, what this attack does is it's an attack on the authentication access tokens that are exchanged by these image resources. So there was a type of link or an image that was exchanging tokens inside of Teams. When that happened, if the victim, and you don't have to click it, so it was another one of these zero-click kind of things. If you view the GIF, meaning you open it in Teams, I don't mean click the GIF, but it just opens in something, the token that was used to validate that file is sent to the attacker through this type of attack. Once they have that token, they could use it to hijack the Teams account. There are several, if you want to read the article on the wiki, there's several different scenarios that they put together showing how this attack can and had been used. Microsoft has released a patch for this, but it is obviously one of those things where did you patch it? And so it is out there. It's something in the wild that you may want to take note of. And I want to say that there was also an article this week from Microsoft, and Microsoft has arbitrarily decided that two spaces after a period in a document was bad, and that Word would forevermore flag that traditional double space as a typo going forward. Now, many of us, especially older of us, do that by default because that was how Sister Mary Margaret taught us to type on the old IBM Selectric in the typing room with her magic cane. That's also how I learned how to type without looking at the keyboard because they would whack you if you look down. But finally, as this is done, I mean, that's going to be put paid to it, I guess. I know this is a contentious argument, and I'm sorry, I'm just so taken with it, but I included an article from The Atlantic that actually has a huge argument in favor of a single space after a sentence, and I don't really care but I can't quit typing those double spaces. I mean, I literally cannot quit doing it. I have done it for so long. It's just something that you do. It's just like that I play a G sustained fourth on a guitar instead of a G chord. And, if you take a guitar class or something, everybody goes, why are you doing that? Like, I don't know. I learned how to do it that way. I made it up myself and it sounded good. So move on. But so Microsoft has decided you can't do that anymore, or at least it's going to be flagged. Israel released an alert that SCADA systems in the water sector had been heavily targeted last Friday and Saturday. So all these attacks were launched all across Israel on SCADA systems in wastewater treatment, pumping stations, and sewage facilities. Now, this is nothing new, but I did want to ensure that if you were supporting these types of SCADA, you were aware these attacks had started on that specific industry. So Israel was issuing warnings about this. Don't know if it's localized, if it was something that's going to go worldwide. They didn't indicate who it was or even speculate on who it was. So we don't know who was doing the attack. But there is information in the article about that particular set of attacks. Now, I'm a huge advocate of finding ways to create reliable and rigid digital identities. So the idea of being able to find out who we are remotely, to identify. I mean, I know a lot of people are real into this anonymity stuff, and that's fine too, but I don't like it so much when I have to hold a meeting. I don't want, Big Daddy 69 signing into my meeting, and turns out that's my boss or something. This particular article that I put up talks about COVID-19 having a huge influence on this on the back side of all this, and how we desperately need better mechanisms. Obviously, there's a lot of issues with this, from privacy to data confidentiality to who issues, validates, maintains it. What is this data? Where is it stored? Is it put in the cloud? Is it available to anyone? And so on and so on. And of course, obviously, there's been research done on this for years and years and years. Back into certificate research and so forth. But there's been a huge surge in demand for some sort of digital identity, management as a result of everyone being sent home, especially non-technical users and new users, and the finding that, single factor passwords and all these old-fashioned ideas are not very reliable or effective. Even the security phrases and security word, that people use to unlock their account are huge targets. As we all know, I mean, we see that OSINT stuff on Facebook all the time, where somebody puts up and says, hey, what are your favorite pet names? Or type in all your pet names and your age and all this stuff here, and we'll tell you what your star sign is. But we really, even get to the point where we start talking about voting in November in the United States. How are we going to do that remotely, or is that even possible? And so there's a lot of issues with that coming up. So there was an interesting article to me about that. I had an FBI warning document that was actually a clear, concise, and useful document. I would really encourage it being distributed to your sort of novice users that are working from home, since despite everything on this document seeming fairly obvious to us, we all know that working from home is fraught with peril, and especially for users that are new and have not done this before. And it just seems particularly threatening with all the COVID scams. We've seen article after article about the increase. Jason talked about that last week, how, this is all targeting all these new home workers. So, I think it's a little clear and concise document you could distribute. It's from the FBI. When we return, he's fast, he's nimble, and he's one of the last great samurai masters. Jason Wood will join us with expert commentary on phishing. I couldn't decide: laziness, persistence, consistency. So stick around.
The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Welcome back. And Jason Wood joins us now, live from somewhere. We won't say where. Jason, how are you?
Good. I'm in my mysterious hideout that I like to call my office.
Yeah, that's real.
So yeah, as Doug made the comment about this, is this laziness? Is it persistence? Is it? It's kind of interesting write-up, I thought, by a SANS Internet Storm Center handler named Jan Kapriva, who basically found an ongoing campaign of attempting to deliver Agent Tesla ransom or spyware rather for over a year. And I thought it was interesting to look at because we are always focused on the new stuff, things that attackers are doing that is new and interesting, and new techniques, in testing and whatnot. And yet here is this blog post that he posted on the Internet Storm Center's site was just a really good write-up of, I thought, of some analysis of something that this attacker just kept plugging away at it. So basically what happened is Kapriva is doing some analysis on his email gateway, and he notices that, hey, we've got this message that keeps coming in, and they're using the same sending address, and they always have the same type of attachment. And this has been going on for a while. And it didn't look terribly interesting, but something about this got him to look at it just a little bit longer than normal, and did a historical search and found out that he'd been receiving these emails off and on since March 2019. And again, this is the same technique as going all the way through here. They're sending in these emails that basically say, hey, your package is going to be delivered soon. Here's your invoice. And then you have this ACE attachment, which is basically a compressed archive, and that it contains malware for somebody to execute. And, so not terribly interesting, right? That sounds kind of generic, but he kind of honed in on the fact that the sending address, you look at a lot of these sending addresses and you see they're really random garbage looking things, ABCD123, whatever it is at yahoo.jp or something like that. But in this case, every email was coming from an email address of diamond@tnt.com. And what he thought was interesting about that is, in spite of the fact that they use just this direct email address, none of the messages had failed the SPF checks for the messages coming inbound. And that, I think, is probably one of the things that caught his attention here, particularly since these messages were definitely not coming from TNT.com. So he started doing some digging into this. Why is it not passing why is it not failing the SPF checks? This is obviously bad. And when he looked at their SPF record for the domain, he found the issue. Someone had set up an SPF record with a little piece of incorrect syntax. They got one character wrong. If you've ever set up SPF records, you know that you end up going and looking at the documentation every time to make sure you've got everything set properly here. In this particular case, it's kind of the format of these rules. It starts off, saying here are the servers, the domains, MX records, whatever it is that can send these emails. And then at the end, you typically have a minus all, meaning if it's not previously defined in this rule, then it fails the check. But in this case, TNT.com accidentally put a question mark instead, question mark all, which means it's neutral to any other server at this point sending emails, causing it to not pass the SPF check, or causing it to pass the SPF check. They didn't look explicitly authorized, but it wasn't against the rules either. Now, in his case, his email gateway was still catching all of this. So that was fortunate. He did notify the company of their configuration issue, and they should, according to him, should be having it fixed soon. He posted this today or yesterday. So that's still coming up, it looks like. Regardless, it was just a small configuration error. I mean, we're talking about a question mark versus a dash, and it resulted in this attacker being able to use this this misconfiguration to potentially get their emails through. Then he looked at the attachments themselves. Like I said, they were ACE attachments, and he extracted those and kind of pulled out the unique executables that were inside of each archive, and found that they were basically droppers for Agent Tesla. Now, if you're not familiar with Agent Tesla malware, what this is an older bit of spyware. It's a couple years old at this point, and it's sold as a subscription to people who want to use it as a quasi-legitimate tool to monitor your own computer and remote access and stuff like that, I guess. And the you go to their site, and they actually would have language on there saying, you are expressly forbidden from using this on somebody else's computer. Only use it on your computer. If you don't, use it on. If you use it on somebody else's computer, then we'll yank your subscription and your license and stuff like that. Then you go to their support forums, and they tell you how to bypass AV and other security tools and get it installed on systems. So kind of a wink and a nod. Yeah, don't do that. But realistically, we all know that this is what we're doing. So the tool itself, it has capability for logging keystrokes, taking screen caps, turning on the webcam, and other ways of getting access to data on the host. So if this is so run-of-the-mill, because I can think of times I've seen messages like this, why talk about it? And one, I thought the first bit was interesting about the attacker taking advantage of a misconfigured SPF rule for a little over a year now, and it just kept working. And so they just kept using it because that, we'll stick with this sender and avoid the getting at least failing that check for email security. What I also thought was interesting, though, is they didn't even bother to change their message in any substantial way. There were slight variations and stuff like that, and the exe changed periodically, but really it was the same message every time. Definitely, I looked at it and thought it just kind of implies the attacker was having enough success that they didn't care about changing it. They didn't have to. And maybe, like Doug says, they were just being a little lazy. Well, we could improve and maybe get better get better delivery rates and people executing it and stuff like that. But this is good enough. We'll just let it ride on autopilot. Maybe, they were doing something like that. Definitely not what I would call an advanced threat, but very persistent. They just kept on with this. So, obviously they didn't feel any particular pressure to change, I assume, on, in the malware world where you're doing this type of criminal activity. There is some pressure to upgrade to the latest and greatest and try the newest techniques and things like that as well to increase your success. It sounds an awful lot like SEO marketing and whatnot, but, as far as the constant drive to change things and tweak things. But in the end result, this attacker just stuck with it and is sticking with it, and apparently is obtaining some level of success. Moral of the story is not all attacks have to be new and exciting to be effective. Sometimes they just continue to work. So obviously you want to keep an eye out for stuff like that in our drive to stay up to date on all the latest stuff. Let's not forget about, what's been used in the past. Make sure that we are being effective in our configurations, and maybe it's good to go take a little bit of a look at our logs and stuff like that and check little things like this, like Jan Capriva found here, and maybe we can find a misconfiguration in a email control like SPF records and notify somebody of a mistake that they didn't even know they had made. So excellent write-up by Jan Capriva. Check out the link in the show notes, and you can read his analysis there.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I certainly think there's two aspects to that. I know that a lot of malware persists for a long, long time, and it's because so many companies have static setups, and they hire somebody to set something up and never look at it again. And I've seen that many times as an auditor or being called in as a consultant. So, all right. So finally, what do we got? Apparently, microbes have memory, meaning bacteria, which can be manipulated. Okay. So in this study, which was in Cell Systems Journal, which I don't subscribe to anymore, you guys know what you did, which I'm just kidding, but the journal just came out. And I did put a reference in the wiki to this, the actual academic article, if you want to go and read it. Apparently, it is possible to use bacteria and manipulation of those bacteria to imprint synthetic circuits on biofilm. This is something we've heard about before, but this particular article was reporting how that was accomplished and how you could do it to use bacteria for computing. And they were able to inscribe some words on a really, really tiny piece of biofilm, which was like smaller than the size of a human hair. So since they could change the nature of it, they could, of course, then use it for computing. Now, I don't know what that would smell like. I was trying to imagine like a room-sized aquarium that's full of some kind of bacteria that you have to throw like, a chunk of rancid Spam or beef suet in there once a week. Yeah, I mean, we've all had, or at least I've had aquariums and they got algae in them and all that kind of stuff. And I was thinking, I bet that's going to be really gnarly. But, I mean, it's quite interesting. So it would allow us to start to imagine a truly biological computer. So this may be the first step in actually building a neuron, which is what they're really trying to do, to build a neuron on a biological film. Wow. And that is the news for now in the time of plague. I'm Doug White. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Security Weekly News. I'll be back Friday with a Security Weekly News wrap-up. So stay safe out there and be nice to others. And